Welcome to the deep dive. Today you've handed us a truly fascinating collection of material, and we're going to try and pull out the most compelling insights.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
It is. We're connecting threads, from the early stirrings of political participation in British India
Mhm.
all the way to like cutting-edge nanotechnology and even the global economy.
Right.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding some pivotal shifts
Yeah,
and, well, enduring questions in India's development.
absolutely. And what's striking about this selection of sources is just the sheer breadth.
Mm.
You've got historical turning points right alongside contemporary policy debates, ancient culture next to modern tech.
Yeah.
So our aim is really to help you see the underlying connections, maybe the bigger picture that emerges from this rich tapestry.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The historical roots. You share documents on the Indian Councils Act of 1892, the Santhal Uprising, 1855-56, and the Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. Looking at these, what really struck you about those early stages of societal change?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is how you see two things happening at once. On one hand, you have efforts to engage with the colonial power structure that existed.
Boy.
But on the other hand, you have these really powerful expressions of resistance against it.
Okay.
Take the Indian Councils Act of 1892. Now, its impact was, let's be honest, limited. It allowed some Indian voices in legislative councils, but without any real power.
So more symbolic.
Pretty much.
Maybe.
But it did signal a subtle shift in the British approach. A recognition, however small, that maybe Indian perspectives needed some consideration. It laid a very, very initial groundwork for future political reforms. Almost symbolic, as you said.
Right, a crack in the door maybe. And then, yeah, the Santhal Uprising. That feels like a completely different beast, a forceful rebellion. What does that tell us?
Exactly. The Santhal Uprising was just this visceral reaction to really deep-seated economic exploitation and oppression. I mean, the Santhal community, they were facing crippling taxation, forced labor, their lands were being seized, and all backed by the colonial administration. So this armed revolt, although it was ultimately suppressed, it just highlights the intense discontent that was brewing at the grassroots level. It really underscores that while some were, cautiously engaging with the system.
That's with the Councils Act.
Yes. Others were just driven to outright rebellion by their circumstances. So these two events, decades apart, they represent really different facets of that early struggle.
And then, fast forward a bit, Champaran Satyagraha in 1917, Gandhi. This feels like maybe a bridge between those approaches. Resistance, yes, but nonviolent and with a clear political goal.
Yes, what's so significant about Champaran is how it demonstrated the sheer power, the potent force of nonviolent resistance, but on a large scale.
Right.
Gandhi's intervention against that oppressive indigo plantation system, the Tinkathia system.
Where they were forced to grow indigo.
Exactly, forced to cultivate it on a big chunk of their land under totally unfair agreements. His work galvanized the local population. His insistence on actually investigating their grievances, even when the British were opposing him, that marked a pivotal moment.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It achieved concrete results, like ending that specific unfair system.
It did.
It really shows the power of collective action and, well, a different kind of leadership.
Precisely. Champaran didn't just bring immediate relief to those farmers. It also propelled Gandhi right to the forefront of the national stage.
Ah, okay.
It basically established Satyagraha as this powerful tool for social and political change, a method that would, shape the whole future of the independence movement. It showed that even marginalized communities could challenge the colonial regime effectively, but through non-violent means.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Now, your sources also took us further back, much further back, to the art and architecture of the Mauryan period and these ancient cave paintings in eastern India. What can we learn about those societies from their art?
Well, these artistic remnants, they offer just invaluable glimpses into the cultural and societal values of ancient India. The Mauryan Empire, flourishing from the 4th to the 2nd century BCE, left behind these monumental structures like stupas, reliquary mounds associated with Buddhism. The most famous is probably Sanchi Stupa. And the intricate carvings on these structures, they depict scenes from the Buddha's life. The Jataka tells stories of his previous births. They give us real insights into their religious beliefs, their social customs.
And those pillars, the Ashokan pillars, they're very striking, often with animal capitals, inscriptions. The lion capital at Sarnath, our national emblem, comes from one.
That's one. The Ashokan pillars, with that remarkable polish they achieved and the powerful symbolism, lions, elephants, bulls, They really showcase the empire's artistic and technical sophistication.
And the inscriptions.
The inscriptions themselves, they reveal Ashoka's efforts to spread Buddhist philosophy, his vision of a just ethical society. They also hint at the empire's vast reach, its centralized administration, and even the urban planning of Mauryan cities like Pataliputra with their organized layouts, infrastructure. It suggests a pretty well-structured, advanced civilization.
Then we have the cave paintings. These are much earlier, aren't they? What stories do they tell?
Yeah, much earlier. The cave paintings, mostly found in eastern and central India, they predate the Mauryans by millennia. Some go back to the Mesolithic, even Neolithic periods.
Wow.
These paintings, created with natural pigments, they offer this incredibly direct connection to the lives and beliefs of prehistoric communities.
What sort of things did they paint?
Recurring themes are things like hunting scenes, lots of depictions of animals, communal dances, rituals, and also abstract geometric patterns. They likely reflect their daily activities, their relationship with nature, maybe even their earliest spiritual beliefs.
So it's more than just art. It's like a window into their worldview, maybe social structures, even early religion.
Precisely. You look at sites like the Bhimbetka caves in Madhya Pradesh, famous for their huge collection of Mesolithic paintings, or the rock shelters in Odisha, they show this continuous artistic tradition over thousands of years. Sadly, these invaluable cultural treasures, they do face threats today. Environmental degradation, human encroachment. It highlights how urgent the need for preservation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your sources also really emphasize Bihar's historical importance, a center of learning, spirituality. Can you elaborate on why this region was so prominent?
Oh, Bihar's significance in learning and spirituality is, well, truly profound. You had ancient institutions like Nalanda University,
Oh,
flourishing from the 5th to the 12th centuries AD. It was a global hub of knowledge. It attracted scholars from all across Asia, and its curriculum was incredibly diverse, not just Buddhist philosophy, but fields like astronomy, mathematics, medicine, logic, grammar.
it's just remarkable. An international university, centuries before we really think of that concept.
Exactly. And Nalanda wasn't alone. There was also Vikramshila University, established in the 8th century AD, another major center for Buddhist studies, particularly the Vajrayana tradition.
Right.
And of course, Bihar is the birthplace of Buddhism itself. Siddhartha Gautama attaining enlightenment at Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree.
A single event that transformed Asia.
And beyond. Plus, Jainism also has deep roots in Bihar. Mahavira, the 24th Tirthankara, was born near Vaishali.
So Bihar was this crucible for two major world religions and a beacon of intellectual thought. That's quite a legacy.
It really is. The ideas, the teachings that originated in Bihar, they just radiated outwards, shaping the philosophical and spiritual landscape of huge parts of Asia. And even today, places like Bodh Gaya are major pilgrimage sites, and there are efforts now to revive Nalanda's academic glory. It shows the enduring importance of this history.
Okay, so we've looked at early resistance, ancient learning. Let's move forward now to the formation of the Indian National Congress, the INC, and also the growth of modern education in Bihar, as your sources detailed. What defined that moderate phase of the INC?
Right, the moderate phase. This is from the INC's beginning in the late 19th century up to the early 20th century. It was really characterized by a belief in achieving political reforms through gradual constitutional means. The leaders of this phase, they were largely Western-educated professionals. They advocated for more Indian participation in governance, but mainly through petitions, resolutions, appeals to the British authorities. Their aim wasn't immediate independence at this point.
Right, more about getting a seat at the table.
Sort of. Greater inclusion within the existing system. They seem to believe in the fairness, the justice of the British system, hoping to persuade them to gradually grant more rights and representation.
So working within the system, not challenging it head on yet.
Precisely. Key figures like Dadahai Nairoji, his work highlighting the economic drain of colonial rule was crucial, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, they championed these methods. The INC gave them a platform to articulate Indian grievances and aspirations.
And did they achieve anything concrete during this period? What were the successes?
Well, they were definitely successful in raising awareness about Indian issues, mobilizing public opinion, at least among the educated elite.
Okay.
Their advocacy did lead to some legislative reforms, like that Indian Councils Act of 1892 we mentioned earlier.
Which was limited, but still.
Exactly. Limited Indian members in legislative councils. They also pushed for social reforms, highlighted the need for better education. But later on, they were criticized, for their limited reach, maybe their perceived reluctance to embrace more radical forms of resistance.
Right, that makes sense. It kind of sets the stage for what came next. Now let's talk about modern education developing in Bihar during this time. How did that unfold?
The introduction of modern education in Bihar, it was largely driven by colonial policies, yes, but also the efforts of Christian missionaries and some, enlightened Indian reformers.
Okay.
The establishment of Patna College in 1863 was a real landmark, the first institution of higher learning in the region offering a Western-style curriculum. Schools were also gradually set up in other towns focusing on literacy, basic education.
And the missionaries played a role.
Yes, they played a pretty significant role, especially in promoting education among girls and marginalized communities, people who were often shut out of the traditional systems.
And what's been the long-term impact of bringing in this modern education system in Bihar?
Oh, it's been a catalyst for pretty significant socioeconomic and political changes. It has contributed to increased literacy rates over time, though challenges definitely remain.
Sure.
It's empowered individuals, particularly women and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, by giving them new opportunities. Education has also played a crucial role in the growth of a professional class and in fostering social and political awareness. And the more recent establishment of new institutions, including the revived Nalanda University, that signifies a continued commitment to education in the state.
Okay, fascinating history. Now, your sources shifted gear quite dramatically into contemporary India, covering everything from new laws, global economic trends, current crises. Let's start with the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023. What's the core purpose of this new legislation? What's its significance?
Right, the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023. It's a pretty significant piece of legislation, mainly focused on safeguarding citizen security in our, increasingly digital world.
Okay, digital security.
A key aspect is its emphasis on protecting personal data. It lays down quite strict guidelines for how government and private entities collect, store, and process our data, which is very relevant given all the concerns around cyber threats and data privacy these days.
So primarily about enhancing digital safety and privacy for citizens.
Yes, but it also includes measures aimed at strengthening digital surveillance. The stated goal is to counter terrorism and cybercrime.
Ah, okay, so there's a balance there.
Exactly. This dual approach has definitely sparked discussions around that balance between security and individual liberties. The law does provide mechanisms for citizens to seek redress against unauthorized surveillance or data collection, trying to ensure some accountability in the digital realm. It's part of India's broader effort to build a stronger cybersecurity framework and cooperate internationally on these issues.
Okay, moving to the global economy now. The Global Wage Report 2022-23. What were the main takeaways on wage trends worldwide?
The report generally indicated a stagnation of real wages globally, largely due to rising inflation and a slowdown in economic growth.
Not surprising, I guess.
No. And interestingly, there were significant regional variations. Some developed economies saw modest wage growth, but many lower-income countries experienced stagnation or even a decline in real wages.
And the pandemic's effects.
Yeah, the lingering effects of COVID-19 on labor markets were still evident. It basically exacerbated existing wage inequalities. Lower-paid workers often bore the brunt of job losses, reduced earnings. And another key finding was the persistent global gender pay gap. Still there.
So a challenging picture for many workers globally. Uneven recovery, persistent inequalities. Okay, turning back to India's economic policies. The Foreign Trade Policy 2023. What's the strategy here for boosting exports? What are the main thrusts?
The Foreign Trade Policy 2023 has a pretty ambitious goal to significantly increase India's export capabilities. It focuses on streamlining export procedures, more digitalization, a single window clearance system. It also aims to provide financial support to exporters, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises, the MSMEs, through things like the interest equalization scheme. The policy also really emphasizes efforts to improve market access for Indian goods, participating in international trade fairs, setting up trade facilitation centers. The big overarching aim is to hit $2 trillion in exports by 2030.
Wow.
Yeah, with specific incentives for tapping into new and emerging markets too.
Sounds like a comprehensive plan to strengthen India's global trade position. Now, Your sources also touched upon the ongoing situation in Manipur. Could you give us a brief overview and maybe touch on the potential impact this could have on the broader national political landscape?
Yes, the situation in Manipur is deeply concerning. It's an ethnic conflict, primarily involving the Aitai community and various tribal groups, including the Kuki, Chin, and Naga.
And the core issues.
They revolve around competition for land, political representation, and unfortunately, long-standing ethnic grievances. This has resulted in significant violence and displacement.
Yeah, it's been heartbreaking to see.
It has, and the potential ramifications for national politics are considerable. It could embolden regional movements seeking more autonomy elsewhere. It could potentially lead to increased polarization along ethnic and religious lines nationally. It might even influence political alliances, especially in states with large tribal populations. And fundamentally, it raises big questions about managing ethnic diversity and minority rights within the Indian federal structure.
Absolutely. Complex, sensitive issues with potentially very far-reaching consequences. Okay, your sources also mentioned Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the context of India's recent G20 presidency. Could you explain the significance of that concept?
Sure. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it's a Sanskrit phrase, translates roughly to "the world is one family." It served as the central guiding principle for India's G20 presidency. It reflects this long-standing Indian philosophical outlook emphasizing global interconnectedness, unity.
And how did India try to apply that?
Well, the aim was to translate that philosophy into concrete global policy initiatives, advocating for inclusive economic growth that benefits all nations, pushing for equitable climate action based on, common but differentiated responsibilities,
Right.
promoting technology transfer to developing countries, fostering global health and well-being. India's approach really emphasized multilateralism, collective action, and tackling shared global challenges in a spirit of cooperation and mutual responsibility. One family.
It's interesting to see ancient philosophy informing modern global engagement. Another really significant and often debated topic in your sources was the potential for a uniform civil code, a UCC, in India. Given the country's religious diversity, what are some of the potential upsides and downsides of such a code?
Right, the UCC. It proposes a single set of laws for personal matters, marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption, that would apply to all citizens, regardless of their religion.
Okay. And the potential benefits?
Well, potential benefits often cited include promoting gender equality,
Yeah.
ensuring uniform rights for women across all religious communities, eliminating potentially discriminatory practices found in some personal laws.
Right.
It could also, proponents argue, foster a greater sense of national unity by reducing legal disparities based on religion, reinforcing the idea of equal citizenship, and maybe streamline legal processes for personal matters.
But given the diversity, there must be significant concerns, potential drawbacks, too.
Absolutely. A primary concern revolves around religious freedom. Different communities have their own personal laws rooted in their traditions, their customs. A UCC could be seen as an imposition on these deeply held beliefs. Implementing it in a country as diverse as India presents a huge challenge. How do you find a common legal framework acceptable to all communities? There's also the risk of social, political tensions flaring up if communities feel their religious or cultural identities are being undermined.
Yeah.
And another valid concern is that if it's not crafted very carefully, a UCC might not adequately address the specific needs or vulnerabilities of marginalized groups within different religious communities.
It really highlights that complex balancing act between unity and diversity in India's legal and social fabric. Okay, shifting gears again, India's space program. Chandrayaan-3 got a lot of attention. What were the key achievements and strategic goals there?
Chandrayaan-3 was, a truly remarkable achievement, successfully landing a rover on the moon's south polar region, a historic first for any nation.
Incredible moment.
Absolutely. Key achievements include demonstrating India's advanced capabilities in autonomous landing on another celestial body, and then conducting scientific investigations right there on the lunar surface.
What kind of science?
The mission aimed to study the composition of the lunar regolith. The soil investigate seismic activity, analyze the thermal properties of the South Pole region, all providing invaluable scientific data.
And strategically, what did it mean for India?
Strategically, Chandrayaan-3 significantly boosted India's self-reliance in space technology. It elevated its standing in the global space community, and it reinforced its growing ambition to be a major player in space exploration, looking ahead to future deep space missions, international collaborations.
A powerful statement of scientific and technological progress. Another fundamental concept you included was the basic structure theory of the Indian Constitution. For listeners not deep into law, can you explain its significance simply?
Sure. Think of the Indian Constitution like a house built on certain fundamental pillars.
Okay.
Things like democracy, fundamental rights, the separation of powers, secularism, the really core stuff. The basic structure theory, which was developed by the Supreme Court, essentially says that even though Parliament can amend the Constitution,
Right, change things.
yeah, yes, but it cannot alter or destroy these foundational pillars. These core features are considered inviolable. The idea is to ensure the essential character of the Constitution remains intact.
So it's like saying you can renovate the house, add a room maybe, but you can't knock down the load-bearing walls. It acts as a check on Parliament's power to make truly fundamental changes.
That's a great analogy. Exactly. While it protects the Constitution's core principles, the theory has been debated, regarding the judiciary's role versus Parliament's authority, but nevertheless, it remains a cornerstone of Indian constitutional law, ensuring a balance between the need for amendments and preserving fundamental ideals.
Okay, that clarifies it nicely. We also need to discuss the reservation policy for economically weaker sections, or EWS. What's the thinking behind this, and what criticisms has it faced?
Right, the EWS reservation. It aims to provide opportunities in education and employment for individuals who aren't covered under the existing caste-based reservation categories, but who face significant economic hardship.
So based on economics, not caste.
Primarily, yes. The justification often rests on promoting social justice by tackling economic disparities, ensuring opportunities for those who lack financial means, regardless of their caste background. It also seeks to broaden the scope of affirmative action beyond just caste.
But there have been concerns, haven't there?
Criticisms.
Yes, definitely. Critics argue that focusing solely on economic criteria might overlook the really deep-seated historical and social disadvantages faced by certain caste groups, disadvantages that aren't just about money.
I see.
There are also concerns that the criteria used to determine economic weakness might be too broad or perhaps too easily manipulated, potentially leading to unintended beneficiaries getting the quota. Some also argue it could dilute the effectiveness of the existing reservation policies that are aimed specifically at addressing historical caste discrimination. So the definition and implementation of the EWS quota, they continue to be subjects of debate and legal scrutiny. Yeah, sounds like another policy with really complex social and political implications and ongoing discussions about its fairness and effectiveness. Let's shift now to the process itself, how the Indian Constitution can actually be amended. How does that work?
Okay, the amendment process. It's outlined in Article 368, and it's designed to allow for necessary changes while still ensuring stability. It's not just one single method.
Okay.
Some provisions, simpler ones, can be amended just by a simple majority in Parliament, like regular laws. However, for more significant amendments, you need what's called a special majority.
And what does that entail?
That means a majority of the total membership of each House of Parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and a two-thirds majority of the members present and voting in each house. So a much higher bar.
Right.
And furthermore, for amendments that affect the federal structure, the relationship between the center and the states, you also need ratification by the legislatures of at least half of the states.
Wow, okay, so multiple checks.
Yes. Once it passes both houses, gets state ratification if needed, and then gets the president's assent, the amendment becomes part of the Constitution. It's a multi-layered process designed to ensure that significant constitutional changes have broad support.
Got it. Your sources also explore the potential impact of a caste census, specifically in Bihar. How might something like that influence the political dynamics within the state?
A caste census in Bihar could potentially, significantly reshape the state's political landscape.
In what way?
By providing concrete, up-to-date data on the population size and the socioeconomic conditions of different caste groups, it could lead to a recalibration of political strategies. Parties might tailor their policies, their election campaigns, much more specifically to certain caste demographics.
Right, targeting voters more precisely.
Exactly. It could also lead to the formation of new political alliances based on the revealed caste equations. And beyond just elections, having precise caste-based data could inform how government welfare programs and reservation policies are implemented, potentially leading to a more targeted, maybe more equitable distribution of resources.
Sounds like it could be a real catalyst for political realignment in Bihar. Another key relationship you highlighted was between the president and the Prime Minister of India. How is that defined constitutionally, and how is it played out in practice?
Constitutionally, India has a parliamentary system. The president is the head of state, largely a ceremonial figurehead, while the prime minister is the head of government, wielding the real executive power.
So the PM calls the shots.
Essentially, yes. The president is obligated constitutionally to act on the advice of the prime minister and the council of ministers. However, the actual dynamic between these two offices, it has evolved since independence. In the early years, there is often perhaps a more collaborative relationship. But over time, especially with the emergence of very strong prime ministers, the prime minister's office, the PMO, has become increasingly dominant. That said, the president can still play a crucial role, particularly in times of political uncertainty, like if there's a hung parliament.
So the Constitution sets the framework, but the practical power balance has definitely shifted towards the PM as the chief executive.
Oh? Hmm.
Your sources also critically examined Indian federalism. What are its key characteristics in balancing state needs with national unity?
Indian federalism is quite unique. It's a blend that tries to reconcile the country's immense diversity, cultural, linguistic, reflected in the states, with the need for a strong, unified nation.
A balancing act.
Very much so. The Constitution divides powers between the central government and the state governments. But there's a notable bias towards the center. The union government has greater authority in certain areas.
Like,
Things like defense, foreign affairs, currency, major infrastructure. While states have their own legislative powers and administrative structures, the central government does retain the power to intervene in state affairs under specific circumstances, like declaring president's rule.
right.
So this creates a kind of dynamic tension, but the intention is to ensure both regional autonomy and national cohesion in such a diverse country.
It sounds like a continuous negotiation. Now, let's zoom in on coalition politics in Bihar specifically. How does that relate to fulfilling national interests? What are the dynamics there?
Coalition politics in Bihar is often shaped by, well, caste-based regional parties coming together to form governments. A key feature is the fluidity of these alliances. Parties frequently shift partners based on political calculations.
Right, we see that happening.
These coalitions can influence national politics. They advocate for Bihar's specific interests, things like agriculture, social justice issues at the national level, especially if they're part of a national ruling coalition.
But can there be conflict?
Yes. Sometimes tensions arise when regional priorities seem to clash with broader national goals. But despite these complexities, Bihar's participation in national coalition governments has generally operated within the democratic framework of Indian federalism.
Okay. You also provided insights into local governance in Bihar Panchayat Raj and rural areas, urban local bodies, and cities. What's the takeaway on their effectiveness and empowerment?
Right. The goal of empowering local governments in Bihar through the Panchayat Raj system and urban bodies is decentralization, promoting greater participation at the grassroots.
And how's it going?
There have been some noteworthy steps, things like the significant reservation for women in panchayat elections. That's a big deal. There's also been an increase in financial resources devolved to local bodies for development schemes.
But challenges remain.
Oh, definitely. These institutions still face big challenges. Financial constraints are often an issue, lack of adequate capacity, training for local representatives, and sometimes political interference from higher levels.
Are there success stories?
Yes, things like the women-led Jivika self-help groups, which have been very impactful, and efforts by, say, the Patna Municipal Corporation, they do demonstrate the potential of empowered local bodies to really address community-specific needs. But sustained support and ongoing reforms are clearly necessary.
Okay, let's shift focus now to the natural world, the Indian monsoon system. What are the basic mechanisms driving it, and what are its key characteristics?
The Indian monsoon system is this incredibly complex meteorological phenomenon. It's driven primarily by the differential heating between the landmass of the subcontinent and the surrounding Indian Ocean.
The land heats up faster than the ocean.
Exactly. This temperature difference leads to a seasonal reversal of wind patterns. During the summer, the southwest monsoon winds, originating over the warm Indian Ocean, carry significant moisture and bring heavy rainfall to most of the subcontinent.
What else influences it?
Other factors, like the position of the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ, and geographical barriers like the Himalayas and the Western Ghats play crucial roles in its onset, its intensity, and how the rain is distributed.
And its main features?
Key characteristics include its timing, typically arriving in June, retreating by September, and its highly variable nature. Some regions get torrential rains, others might face drought conditions in the same year. This variability has a huge impact on agriculture and the Indian economy overall.
A vital, yet unpredictable force. Your sources also looked at India's energy sources. Are we self-sufficient currently? And what are some potential alternative energy paths?
India has a pretty diverse energy mix. Coal is currently the dominant source, unfortunately, followed by oil, natural gas, and then a growing share from renewables, solar, wind, hydropower.
But are we self-sufficient?
No, not really. India is significantly reliant on imports to meet its oil and natural gas needs. We have substantial coal reserves, yes, but burning coal raises major environmental concerns. So currently, domestic energy production isn't enough to meet the country's rapidly